Hi, and welcome to another Unity 3D tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a simple inventory system as well as object respawning on the landscape. This tutorial was requested by Ryan on my Facebook page, so I hope this helps to answer a few questions. Okay, to begin with, I've created this new 3D project. And what I've brought in is this character whose name is Ethan, and you can find him in the Assets Import Package characters. If you bring that in and then search through your standard assets, you'll see that there's a characters folder and there's a third person folder. And go into prefabs and grab this third person and drag it onto the environment, and you'll get this character. Now, when you run, it will automatically have the key codes and everything on there for you. Yes, his texture is white. There's also a grey version that I've noticed. Feel free to take his texture into Photoshop and colour him up if you like, but this is just to demonstrate. Now, what I'm going to do is for each of these bushes that I've added into the scene, I'm going to have them as a spawning point, and they're going to spawn fruit. So Ethan will be able to run over and pick up the fruit. When they get picked up, they'll appear on the screen in a little inventory GUI box. So it's kind of similar to the way that fruit and plants and things spawn in Fallout or Skyrim. And we're just going to write some simple code and attach it to our tree objects so that they can spawn objects. The objects that will spawn, we'll just make them simple spheres, just to make it easy, of different colors. Now, these bush models here that I've got, I grabbed off of the Unity Asset Store. They were free, and there's some quite handsome looking models in there, so check them out. Of course, if you're just playing around with this, you don't have to have a bush model. You could just have a cube as a spawn point if you so wished. The other thing I've done with these is take away their mesh colliders. If you have a look in the hierarchy for this particular bush, I've turned off this mesh collider, which will allow our character to run through it so that he'll be able to run through and collide with the fruit, which will then be picked up. Right, let's begin. So for this tree here is going to have some red spheres on it as its fruit. So we will go into Game Object, 3D Object, and create a sphere. There's one there, it's quite big. When we want it to appear on the tree, probably want it to be about Christmas bauble size, so that's about right. Now we also need to give it a red color, so we'll go into the project, create a material for it, call that red, and set the albedo color to red, assign that to the sphere. Okay, and let's call that fruit 1. And then make a prefab out of it. So drag it from the hierarchy into the project and you'll get your prefab. At that point, we can delete the fruit that is in the hierarchy, or we could recolor it and then use it for the second type of fruit. So what I might do is actually leave that there and create a duplicate fruit so it doesn't get mixed up, and then call this one fruit 2. Create a new material, so instead of red I can duplicate that, call it green. So it's Control D for duplicate, and set the green color, and then add that green color onto our second fruit so that it is now green. And do the same thing for the third fruit, which will be on the third tree, is duplicate the fruit and call that fruit 3. Duplicate a color, call that blue, make it blue, and apply it to that third sphere. So now that we have 3 different fruits, with these other 2, fruit 2, we can make that into a prefab, and fruit 3 we can make into a prefab as well. So here they are here. Now, if you just want to clean this up and get rid of these materials, we can just drag them into the materials folder just to get them out of the road, and also this grass one as well. And now we can delete these 3 fruits from the scene and use the prefabs instead. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is create a script and attach it to this bush here. And I'm going to create a new C# script and call it spawn fruit. Just open that up. And I will just post my code here that I've already got for it. So the first thing it's going to do is have a public game object fruit. So this is where we give it the prefab for the particular fruit that we're creating. Then I've got a spawn number here, which is set to 8. So it will create 8 fruit on that tree. Now the spawn function itself loops around spawn num time. So in this case, it's going to be 8. And each time it instantiates a new fruit object. The position of the fruit will be based on the position of the bush itself plus a small random value. Now, in this case, if we look at the bush, just go to the bush for a moment here, you can see that its 0, 0 position is right on the ground. So therefore we want all the Y positions of the fruit to be positive between here and here. If the position of the fruit, if the position of the tree itself, its origin point is in the center of the bush, then you would have a random range which goes into the negative. And you can see that back in the code for the X and the Zs, we've actually going between -1 and 1 to be added to our X position. But for the Y, we're going between 0 and 2. So this will create 8 fruit that are randomly spaced on that tree. So call the spawn function from the start and then save that. And we'll go back into Unity, grab our script and drag and drop it onto the particular bush. Then in the inspector, you'll see that there's an exposed variable called fruit, and we can add fruit1 to that. Now when we run it, it will use fruit1 as a prefab and create the positions of the fruit randomly. If you don't like where they're getting created, you can fiddle around with those random values. If you want them to be in a particular location, then you could also specify those in an array. And each time you run it, you'll get a different location where those fruit are going to spawn on the tree. Now we can put this same script onto the other bushes as well. So if I put it onto bush 2, select bush 2 and give it the green fruit. And then select bush 3 and add that script. Oops. And give it the blue fruit. And when you run, you should get different colored fruits on the different trees. So if we just take a little bit of a walk around here, there's our red tree, there's our blue tree, and there's our green tree with the fruits. So we're using the exact same code for the spawns, which is good because we don't want to be writing lots of multiple pieces of code. Next, we're going to make the fruit responsible for its own respawning when you run over the top of it. So let's create a C# script and we'll call it respawn and open that up in our editor. I'm just going to paste some code I've already written in here for you. Right, so here's our respawn code. Now the fruit that we've got is spheres which come with a collider on them, a sphere collider. So we're going to, on a collision between our character, which also has a collider on it, and the fruit itself, is we're going to turn off the sphere collider and the mesh collider, and this will essentially make the fruit invisible, and you won't be able to run into it either. Okay, so we're setting both of the enableds to false. Once it has been collided, we're then going to call a new function called respawn in 5 seconds. So the invoke function will call another function after a certain amount of time. Now, this respawn function that we're writing ourselves here, all it does is it turns on the sphere collider and the mesh collider that we turned off before up here. So what's going to happen is we run into a fruit, it's going to become invisible and turn itself off, but it's still going to be there in the environment so that it can make itself visible again in 5 seconds. So in that way, we're not actually instantiating any more fruit, and it's just taking care of itself. Now, let's just save this and go back to Unity. And you want to attach that respawn to the prefab of the fruit itself. And you could do it to all of them, but we're just going to do it with the red one for now. Okay, when we run it, I have to take our character and run over to the tree. If you watch the red balls as we run into them, they'll disappear, but then wait for 5 seconds and they reappear back on the tree again. And you saw that happening there. Right, so this script can be used on all of our fruit. If you want a different respawn time for different sorts of fruit, we can put in here a public, let's make it an int respawn time. And we'll initially set that to 5, and we can use R time down here, like that. Save it and go back to Unity. Now if you go to the red fruit and have a look at where the script is attached, you've got our R time here, respawn time in 5 seconds. We can grab the respawn code and drop it onto the green fruit, and you might have it respawn in 10 seconds. So now you can change that in here, still using the exact same code. For the blue fruit, we can put the respawn on there, and you can also change that, and let's just make it 8 seconds, so that they will now respawn at different times when you run over the top of them. And the fruit itself takes care of its own respawning. So the tree doesn't have to keep track of whether all the fruit has gone and then respawn it later on. It's just that particular fruit. And we're not instantiating any more objects, which is also good. So I think I spoke in a previous tutorial about having a pool of objects that you use over and over again rather than constantly instantiating inside of a game update loop, because that process of instantiating and destroying is very processor heavy. So the less you can do that in your game, the better. Right, so now moving on, we're going to start counting when the fruits have been picked up and how many have been picked up, and show them in a little inventory on the screen. In order to have a visible inventory, we need some icons to show up on the screen. So I've been to iconarchive.com and just found 3 circles, which are each of these different colors that I'm going to use. So I'll just drag them in from my desktop and drop them into the assets folder. Now, we're going to work with the GUI system, which was going to require sprites. When you first bring these in, if you have a look in the inspector, it's going to tell you that the texture type is a texture. And for each one of them, you want to drop down this list and change them to a sprite. They're going to be single sprites. You don't have to change any of the other settings. We probably actually don't want mip maps turned on, so you can turn that off and then apply. So that creates the blue one. Notice that the transparent background that came with the button is now showing up here. And I'll do that with these two as well. Sprite, get rid of mip maps. Mip maps is really for things that are in the distance. If you're creating an image that's going to be on the graphical user interface, then it's not going to be at a distance. It's going to be the same distance from you all the time. And so that you don't want to generate these mip maps, which are like level of detail images for billboards and that are in the distance. So turning that off will just optimize it a bit, and we'll do it with this last one as well. Turn off bitmaps and apply. Now to build our heads-up display, which will show us how many of our objects that we've picked up, we're going to go into the hierarchy and right-click GUI and find the panel object, which is down here. As soon as you add that, you'll notice that you get this a transparent glaze over the top of your game view. You also will get a canvas added automatically, which will have the panel as a child, and you'll get this event system component also. Don't worry about those things. That's just to make the whole GUI system work. What we're interested in is this panel. Now the panel's currently covering the entire camera. To see the panel, if you go into the scene view and hit on 2D and then zoom out, you'll see the panel arrive, and you can just move around a bit. There it is, taking up the entire screen. Now notice that your little 3D world was down here and the panel is up here. These things are not relative to each other when you're looking at the 2D view. The 2D view is just for designing your GUI elements, or if you were creating a 2D game, you could look at it in this view as well. But as far as the 3D world goes, the 3D objects that are sitting right down here are not related to this. Right, so we've got this panel and we want to resize it. So we can grab it and you'll see it resize here, because this is what you're going to see in your game, and this is just our design view. So we want it to be maybe about, this big, and then we want to center it in the screen. So we can go over to the inspector panel and you can actually select these different positions for your object. So you can Alt to set its position and click. Now that will set it to the middle, as you've seen here. You can Shift to set its pivot location if you want it to pivot around this middle center at the bottom, which is what we do. I'm just going to grab my panel and bring it down now that I've centered it. Now, no matter what your screen size becomes, because of the way you've got the pivot point, you can see that that snaps to the center bottom, which is what we want it to do. Now you can resize this a little bit later. You can also recolor it by putting background images in the image part of the panel that you can see here. But I'm just going to go with the default Unity one for now. Next we're going to add a grid layout to this panel. And that's going to help us control where our little icons are going to appear. So as we pick up the different icons, what I want for these button images here to pop up in here, showing us that we've picked up those icons. That we've picked up those objects off of the trees. And later on, we'll also add a little number over the top to show how many of those particular objects we've picked up. Okay, so in this panel, we're going to go Add Component. Now, it's going to be a grid layout group, which is already selected there. If I go into here, it is hiding somewhere in here and I can never find it. So I always just type grid and get the grid layout group to come up immediately, and then you can find it there. Now this gives you a table as such in this panel where you can set the cell size and the spacing between the cells. We want our icons to appear as 25 by 25 in that, and we're going to have them at 10 and 10 pixels apart, which will leave some space between them. Alright, so now that you've set that, if you come up to the panel in the hierarchy and right click on it, we're going to add an image in there. Now, as you can see, this image has been added and it's just down here. Because our character is white, it's quite difficult to see, but if I zoom in on this view, just move it around a bit, you can see that's where our little 25 by 25 icon has appeared. Now, as you add more icons, the grid layer will look after their positioning for you, which is just such a nice feature. But we probably don't want it sitting up in that top corner, so we want it to sort of snap into the middle and for them to spread out from the middle. So if we just go back to the panel and to its grid layout group, we can go to the child alignment and set middle center, and that will snap the children to this middle in here. Now, if we add another image to our panel, UI image, you'll see that it's snapped up to that top corner again. It's not inside the panel, but that's the alignment of the image itself and not the panel setting. So with the image selected in the hierarchy, you want to go over to its transform and actually set it to the middle, and now it will flick into the middle. And we're going to add one more image, and we also need to set that into the center there. Okay, so they're going to stay nicely aligned. You might want to come back and resize the panel so that they fit neatly in there. And then we will change these. So this is going to be fruit 1. This will be fruit 2. And this will be fruit 3. Now, for each of these images, we're going to set the sprites according to these values here. So let's grab that and put it, oh, hold on, which one's that? That's fruit 3. So we're going to put it on fruit 3 if I select it. I don't want to get these colors mixed up. Put the sprite there. Now to 2, which is the green one. And fruit 1, which is our red fruit, there, like that. And now you can see that those sprites are being used down here. We've actually got a little sort of traffic light looking system in our, I guess we'll call it our inventory, which is what it is. And those images are going to show up and tell us which items we have picked up in the landscape. Right, so to make these inventory items stackable, which means that you can collect them and they'll keep accruing on top of each other, so that you could pick up like 10 red things, you need to know how many you've got in your inventory. So we're going to put a little text over the top of these to give us a count of how many of these items we have. So for each of our images that are attached to our panel, you want to right click, go to UI, and we're going to add a text element to it. And you'll see this new text box pop up for us. You want to align that the best way you can with your icons down here. Sometimes they're off center, and you'll find that sometimes they have the numbers like just down here on the corner of how many of that you have. Or you might want to put it in the middle. It's up to you. So let's just say we're going to put it down here. Now that text itself has the default font, and you can change that. I'm just going to set the color to, try white. It's probably not the best color, is it? We'll just leave it like that. You can play around with it yourself. Now let's also change the text to 0 because there's 0 of them. And we might let's try to make it a little bit bigger too. Okay, that'll do for now. Right, so that's the text on fruit 1. Now I'm just going to duplicate this text here and copy it down onto fruit 2. Because we've already got all its settings, by duplicating it and then moving it across here, it's a lot easier than going back through and setting. So I'll just duplicate that and then drag that onto fruit 3 and move that across to align it there. So these will be our counts for these fruit. Now, in order to know which items we've picked up, we need to put tags onto our fruit prefabs. So let's go to fruit 1 in the project. This is our red fruit, and in the inspector it's currently untagged, so I'm going to add a tag for this, which will take us into our tag list, and let's call it really simply red. While we're here, we'll add green and blue at the same time. Okay, so we've added those 3 tags. Now if you come back and select your red fruit prefab, and we can tag it with red. And for the green fruit, we will tag it with green. And for the blue fruit, we will tag it with blue. Now we can use those tags in our script when we've collided with the objects to tell us how many of those particular objects we have accrued. Before we continue on to the script, we need to make sure that everything is named properly, because the script is going to rely on the tags being the same for the objects that you're picking up and the inventory items as well. So first of all, just back in the panel, if you look at your fruit 2 and your fruit 3, the text that's been attached to it as a child is called text in brackets 1 and text in brackets 2. These need to be called text. And because we initially duplicated them, they're going to have those names on the end. So get rid of the things so that these are all named text with a capital T. And then you want to select each of the icons and use the same tag that you use for the particular fruit. So 1 is red, 2 is green, and 3 will be blue. Right, the next thing is that we're going to clear these objects out of the panel so that they won't appear as an inventory item until you've picked one up. That means that the first one you pick up will need to show that you've got a number 1 here. So in all of the text boxes, change the 0 to 1, like that. Okay, then we can close these. Then we want to grab the 3 of these, which I can shift select like that, and create prefabs out of them. So drag them all down into the asset folder. Oh, why didn't that work? Okay, doesn't like it. One at a time. All right, so we now have our fruit object prefabs that grow on the trees, and then we also have our fruit icons which show up. Now the icons themselves, because they were named fruit 1, 2 and 3, Unity won't let you have a game object with the same name, so it's tacked a 1 on the end of each of the names for these things. That's all right, we're not worried about those. Okay, so we've got these prefabs for our icons that are going to represent the objects in the inventory. We can now go up to our panel and actually delete these 3 things out of there. So our panel is now empty again. All right, now we're ready for the code. So create a C# file called pickup. I already got it here. And in pickup, we're going to type this code. Okay, so at the top, you'll need to add in this Unity Engine GUI so that we can control the text and the panel items. The other 2 should already be there. We've got our class called pickup. Then we're going to have 2 public game objects. One is a single game object, which is going to be your panel, and the next one will be an array of the icons we've created, which is why we made them into prefabs. All right, so this whole thing, if we just look down through it, is an onCollision. I'll just make this window bigger. We might be able to fit the entire function on the screen. I'll just go up to onCollision there. Yep, okay. So when the player, so this code is attached to the player, on their collision with something, which will be our fruit on the trees, okay, we're going to first of all loop through all of the icons in the inventory panel. Then we're going to test if the item in the inventory panel has the same tag as the item we've just run into. That means we've already got that item in the inventory. So we've already got one of them. We've picked them up. In that case, we're going to grab hold of the text that belongs to that icon, which we do with this line here, convert it from text into an integer, with this and then add 1 to it, because you can't add 1 to a string, so we need to convert it. We then take that value and we put it back into the text object there. So that will be what controls adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to our text that we put in the inventory. Right, now, if we don't find the icon for the object we've just run into in the inventory already, then it's time to add it. And we do this by instantiating the icon. Okay, now I know I said don't put an instantiate in the update loop, and we're not really. Technically, we're not. This is not happening. This is happening on collision enter, and it's only happening now and then. So I don't think this is a big problem with performance. And this is kind of the easiest way to do it. And after you've picked everything up, you won't need to keep instantiating it. So this is only the first time you pick up one of these items. So the first inventory item will be instantiated if you run into red, the second one into green, and the third into blue, which means that you need to make sure that you've got these in the right order. All right, so that's all of the code that you need for that. And save it and go back into Unity. Now, drag and drop your pickup script onto your third person controller and it will appear down here. Okay, now I've already tried this out, but for the inventory panel, it will be empty for you. You need to drag the panel, so this one here, onto this inventory panel here. Then for these inventory icons, set the size to 3, and then you want to grab hold of these icons that you made before, these prefabs. So put them in order. So we're going red, then we're going green, and then we're going blue. Make sure that you're grabbing hold of the icon prefabs, which are these blue squares, not these ones. These are the ones that are growing on the tree. All right, so now we can run it and let's see what happens. Right, so our inventory is empty. We can look around. Let's go and get some green things. And as we pick them up, you'll see them go into the inventory. So the first one you pick up adds the icon, and then the rest count them. Now, if you want to add more inventory items, then you just keep making more items, icons, I should say, just the same way that we made those 3 fruit. And you can see now, if you saw before, that these blue berry things that we've created, and we've run over them, actually did respawn after a certain amount of time. So that's all still working as well. And you can see that the count is going up in our inventory. Oh, there was a respawn. Okay, so this is all working really nicely now for us. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you is how to remove items from your inventory. So if we assume that what we're picking up at the moment is fruit, let's assume that we're also going to be, a character's going to be eating it. And so when we click with the mouse on any one of these things in our inventory, they're just going to disappear and decrement the counter down by 1. And then if it reaches 0 items left in your inventory for that particular fruit, it's just going to disappear from the inventory. Right, so in order to do that, first of all, create a new C# script called eat, which I've got here. And in that, we're going to add this code. Okay, so we're going to create a public void function called eatMe. And in that, it's going to test if the icon that's been clicked on, the text component of that is greater than 1. So if there's still more than 1 item in the inventory, then we're going to take the count down by 1. So see, we've got a -1. This is the opposite code to what we had before, where we were incrementing it by 1. Okay, so we take the count down, we put that back in here to display a lesser count. Now, if there is only 1 item left in the inventory, it's going to go down to this else statement and destroy the icon out of our panel. So it'll be gone altogether. Right, so that's nice and simple. So save that. Now go back to Unity, And we need to add this eat script onto our 3 fruit objects. So just grab a hold of it and drag it onto fruit 1, grab it fruit 2, and fruit 3. Okay, remember we're adding it to the icon, which is this blue box, not to the fruits themselves. Now we need to make these icons clickable. So to do that, select it down here in the project, and over in the inspector we want to add a button. Okay, so we can search for button up here, and I just did before, as you can see. So click on button. It will add this button component. Now the eat script is just sitting there. All we do to make this work is to go to the OnClick for the button and add what we're going to click on. So for this is fruit 1, I remember. Yep. Okay, so we're going to go to fruit 1, which is ourself. And then in there, we're going to look for the eat script, which is attached to it. And we're going to look for the eat me. Now, this is probably off of your screen at the moment. Well, let me just see if I can move this over a little bit. Eat me. Select that and it will come up in here. And so when you now click on the button, it will run that eat me script. So you want to do that for each of these fruits here. Let's add a button and we will plus this. Make sure that you're selecting this fruit itself. Fruit 2 and the eat function. That's my dog snoring, if you can hear that in the background. It's very inconsiderate. Let's go down to eat there. And finally, might have to kick him in a minute if he doesn't stop snoring. Fruit 3, add a button, and we will click here. Find fruit 3, which is that one. Find the eat me. Okay, so now they're all set to run for each of these when you click on them in the inventory panel. Right, so let's run it and have a go. Okay, so we're going to go and pick up some red fruit and they will be added into our inventory, and go and pick up some green fruit, which will be added, and some blue fruit. There we go. Now we can click on them and you can see the numbers going down. Actually, nicely that we've got this enlarged over here because you can see it in the scene that as we click, we're removing these objects. And when you get down to 1 and you remove it, it's gone. And then we can go and pick up some others as you like. All right, so that's basically the end of the tutorial. You now have a really simple system of items that will respawn after you've picked them up, and a little inventory control panel where you can keep an eye on how many different things you've got, as well as getting rid of them. So on this click, you might, throw the item out, which usually happens. If it's sort of a non-edible item. In some games, if it's edible, you'll hear a crunching sound and then the health will go up. So you can program that in to that eat me function for each of these, and you could have different functions that run in that OnClick. But that essentially shows you how to create a button onto an image and then run some code that's attached to it as well. Well, I hopefully that was helpful to you. Thank you, Ryan, for the suggestion again, and I will talk to you in the next tutorial.